This is Right on the Money with Tom Mosley, founder of Mosley Wealth Management.
Our mission at Mosley Wealth Management is to help people make sure they never run out of income the rest of their life and they pay as little as they're legally required to pay in taxes.
Since 1995, Tom Mosley and his team have been creating comprehensive, custom financial plans to help you preserve what you've earned and pursue what you've envisioned.
In retirement, a lot of people have built a great lump sum. We call that your lumber yard. But you need a blueprint to put that lumber yard into a plan that you can build a retirement house to live in.
What's on your mind this week, Southern California? The stock market, taxes, inflation, income, Social Security, how to ease into the life of your dreams? Let's discover conservative financial strategies starting right now. This is your Right on the Money Radio Hour with Tom Mosley.
And a very happy weekend to you. You are listening to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. He is the founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management based right here in Southern California. And I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. We're so glad you're joining us today. Each week, Tom and I are committed to providing you with retirement planning solutions. We have a really fun show for you today. We're going to be talking about some things that, Tom, we have never talked about on this show before. How are you doing this week?
I am doing well. It's great to be back with you. Can I tell them a secret,
Yes.
Kristen?
Sure, go for it.
We record these shows during the week and we play them on the weekend. I'm sorry if you are so disappointed that you're not getting this live, but it's just a way of making sure that we come through with you and technology doesn't get in the way. And Kristen, it's been a long time since we've recorded, so it's good to be back with you.
Yes,
Okay?
thank you. I know we've been I think this is our 83rd episode together, and we've only
Yes.
ever had to have 3 reruns. So that's pretty good.
Not bad at all. And
Yes.
sometimes like for 6 weeks in a row, from the last week of April to through the first week of June, I've just had things going on. And when I didn't have things going on and was available, you had things going on because you're a nationwide broadcaster, really, because
Mhm.
you fly to Phoenix and do TV shows. You go down to Charlotte, I know, often and do
Yep.
live presentations for different advisors and advisors in Cincinnati and other places I know you've been. So,
Yes.
so you know, we're both busy, and it's
Yes.
nice when we can get together because I think I can say this to the audience because you and I know how this thing really is. We're really good friends,
We
and
are.
we enjoy doing this show together,
Yes,
as well as the TV show.
absolutely. Well, we'll catch up together before we start recording, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, we should go ahead and record the show, right? Let everyone else
Yeah,
in on the conversation.
yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
Well, you have picked a really interesting topic for this week's discussion. The title of today's episode is Investment Crimes You May Be Committing. Now, before we get into this, Tom, I know that so many people out there like crime shows. They really enjoy them. I'm curious, how do you feel about crime shows? And I'll give you my take on them.
Why are you asking me that? I'm not one of the major network crime show watchers. I really
Hmm.
don't. Now, if you put it on Netflix and I can binge watch something like Bosch or something like that on Netflix, I've watched multiple ones of those because I really do like that. I like the Jack Ryan series and
Yes.
things like that.
Yep.
But some of the just regular the regular network shows of, the fire shows and the police shows and stuff. I don't really get into that, but they're interesting to think about some of the things.
For sure. Well, I typically don't do crime shows. That kind of stuff affects me pretty deeply. So I never understand the people that are like, "Oh, I love falling asleep to these, criminal podcasts or criminal shows." I'm like, "Are you crazy? Like I would be up for hours if I had to listen or watch that before
No,
trying to go to sleep."
I get it too. And you know what? The police always tell me that I have multiple police officers, law enforcement officers, sheriffs, and different things like that who are clients. And they always tell me that they don't like those shows either because, you can come on and 54 minutes later with a few commercial breaks in between, you can see a great mystery, a really hard crime to solve and solve it. So everybody in real life thinks you can solve something in 54 minutes.
Right.
So
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm sure they're like, this is not reality. reality, right?
Right,
Well,
right.
can I let you in on a little secret? I don't know if I've
Sure.
ever told you this before, Tom. But way back in the day, in a previous life, before I ever got into the financial services industry, I got to play a cop on the show Blue Bloods during the first season. It was a
Oh,
regular job
wow.
for me.
Wow, that's pretty cool, and I never knew that. I might watch Blue Bloods now just to see, my girl Kristen on
Aw.
there,
Well,
so
what's funny is you have to know where you're looking. It's like, oh, there she is, or there's half her face, or there's part of her head, that kind of thing. But I did get to share the makeup trailer with Tom Selleck, and that was a huge thrill. He was a
oh,
very nice
wow.
guy.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So that
That's
was
pretty
fun.
cool.
All right. Well, back to the subject at hand. So I think one of the appeals of crime shows is it's fun for people to see bad guys being bad and then the good guys going after them. Right. And we love to see, I love good winning over evil, right? Good guys
Right.
getting the bad guys. But what's interesting when it comes to crimes is how many out there actually involve money. And money can typically be a motivator to have people do bad things. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. What can we learn from some of the biggest criminals out there who decided to make money work in the wrong way? So, we're going to go through a little jail tour. We're going to scare you straight right now. We're going to look at these crimes and how they can have a big effect on your retirement if you follow in their footsteps. I love the creativity of this show, Tom. So,
Well,
my
good.
goodness, lots to get to, right?
Right, right.
Okay, so first up, chasing unrealistic returns.
You know what? Some people are gullible, I'll say it that way.
Mhm.
There's a saying that I think a lot of our parents told us, my mom told me this, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yep.
And there's some people that just fall into chasing, in our business sometimes we call it chasing shiny objects.
Mhm.
I mean, the returns just sound great. I'm gonna break this down into something you might hear on the radio or on television is when somebody advertises. For instance, sometimes they'll advertise a CD rate that just sounds so unreal, and it's got that big number by that, and it's got a little star by it,
Mhm.
and you think, "Wow, that's 3 times more than anybody else is paying." Well, when you see something that's, like, bigger than it's ever been, I want you to think of a guy named Charles Ponzi,
Mm.
because Charles Ponzi was a guy who came along. He's known for originating the Ponzi schemes,
Mhm.
and it's where you take and the investors that are paying into the project now, and they're promising some kind of massive return if they'll just give them the money, then they're taking those monies and paying the people they promised the same returns to last month. And it works for a while as long as you have a new inflow of money and people are getting promised, and as long as people don't want all their money at one time.
Right.
Because a Ponzi scheme, you know, I think he got deported to Italy over this whole thing after serving some time. But you're promising a return that is not realistic to people so that you can gather their money, and then so that you can keep it and maybe pay the people that you promised last month or the month before or last year some of the returns so that they feel like they're getting a little bit of their money out. But here's the problem: everybody loses in a Ponzi scheme. So
Mhm.
you've got to be careful when it sounds too good to be true, and you're getting a huge upfront. I was teaching a class one time, and it was at Fullerton Community College,
Mhm.
and this was about 10 years ago. And it was a class of about 20 people, and this guy sitting right in the middle. I always ask in that 4-hour class we used to teach on college campuses, I always ask, what kind of return do you expect on your money? And this one guy said 20%.
Wow.
And the whole class just sort of laughed. And he turned around on the class and said, "No, I'm getting 20% for my money."
Mhm.
And at that point, I had the little clicker that forwarded the PowerPoint.
Right.
And I just went to him and handed him the clicker. And I said, "You need to teach this class if you've got somewhere you can legitimately get 20%."
Mhm.
Because everybody else in the room realized that was an unrealistic return. I followed up with that guy, and sure enough, he found out about 2 months later he had been taken
Oh,
on a
gosh.
Ponzi scheme.
Mm,
So you've got to be careful with your investments. Make sure, number one, that your investments are registered. They're
mhm.
registered with the Securities and Exchange. That means that you're going to be able to see and understand it. It's a stock, it's an exchange traded fund, it's a mutual fund. If you're not an investment, but if you're putting your money into an insurance product like a fixed indexed annuity that's never going to go down in value,
Mhm.
may give you a bonus. We've got some of those right now that are giving bonuses upfront, real money bonuses of 14%, maybe even 21% if there's a little fee with them. So, there's some real things, but you've got to read the fine print.
Yes.
Don't just chase that shiny Ponzi object, because what you might be doing and what they might be doing is putting your money into the pot so that somebody can be paid out that put their money in earlier, and they can get a sense that they're making money for a little while. And then all of a sudden, Mr. Ponzi goes to Italy, or Mr.
Yeah.
Ponzi disappears and your money disappears.
Right.
We've got a mutual friend we talk about often, and his name is Dave Bach, and he's got a lot of sayings because he's got 13 New York Times best-selling books that are out there, including The Automatic Millionaire, The Latte Factor, Smart Women Finish Rich. All of those things
Mhm.
are Dave Bach books. And Dave says it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. So don't
Yes.
don't be so quick to chase something that sounds way too good to be true. You need to match and know what that risk level is. Make sure that the security is registered, it's legitimate, it's something that can be tracked and secured by at least knowing that it's registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. You need to be careful taking a chance, because once you lose your money in a Ponzi scheme, it's gone.
It's gone.
It's
Yes. And
gone
and this is
completely.
for sure. And this is why too, making sure you're properly diversified and that you've not put all of your eggs in one basket is so crucial as well.
Hey, do you think you might have been taken in a Ponzi scheme and you want some legitimate financial advisor to look at your situation? That's where we offer the retirement blueprint on this show. You come into one of our 5 offices, you meet with one of our 9 fiduciary advisors spread across Southern California. We can sit down and look at your investments, give you a risk score, tell you if they're registered or not, and make sure that your retirement is secure. But you have to pick up the phone and call us.
And that number to call to schedule your time to come in and receive your complimentary retirement blueprint is 888-930-5609. Stay with us. We've got a lot more investment crimes you may be committing and what you need to know about them right after this.
For your own no-cost retirement blueprint, call Tom Mosley of Mosley Wealth Management, 888-930-5609. That's 888-930-5609.
Stock market losses have you worried? Claim your free portfolio risk report and protection review from Tom Mosley of Mosley Wealth Management, 888-930-5609. If the recent market volatility has you worried about your retirement investments, you're not alone. Right now is the time to take action to protect your investments. Surely markets do not always rise, but if you are in your 50s, 60s, or 70s, you don't have the same time to make up for portfolio losses as you did in your 30s and 40s. Claim your free portfolio risk report from Tom Mosley of Mosley Wealth Management, 888-930-5609. Your portfolio risk report will provide action steps of what you could do to protect your wealth from current market swings. Get your free portfolio risk report right now. Call financial advisor Tom Mosley of Mosley Wealth Management, 888-930-5609.
Welcome back. You're listening to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and we're so glad you're joining us today. If you're just tuning in, we are talking about investment crimes you may be committing. Of course, we started off today's show talking about those crime shows, which we know a lot of you out there enjoy watching. Tom, as you and I shared, they're not our favorite ones to watch, right?
Right.
But we are using these analogies and examples because we know that we have folks who may be unknowingly unknowingly committing investment crimes, and we want you not to be in that position. This next one is interesting that we're going to be talking about, because you always say that you don't want anyone paying more to the IRS than they are legally required to pay in taxes. And so that brings up neglecting tax obligations. That's the next crime on our list here. Well, there's a difference between being convicted of tax evasion and being smart with the tax code and doing tax avoidance. But let's first talk about this crime of tax evasion. There's some notorious characters throughout history who have engaged in this crime, right?
Al Capone. Okay, I think he was the person that they built the entire old TV black and white show with Elliot Ness and the Untouchables, because
Yes.
Al Capone, I don't know if he was ever on the show, but it was the idea around Al Capone during Prohibition, and they ran all kind of illegal and illicit schemes, from prostitution to alcohol to gambling and mobsters and things like that. And though he was guilty of so many different things, the thing that eventually sent Al Capone to prison for 11 years was tax evasion. They finally worked it around, and they couldn't catch him. They couldn't get the scheme. The mobsters that would go up against him would mysteriously die, in gunfights, and they couldn't remember who did it or couldn't find out who did it. But they finally got Al Capone, put him in prison for 11 years in federal prison for tax evasion. And I want to tell you, one of the biggest things, one of the biggest risks you can run is not knowing your tax situation when it comes to your retirement money. A lot of times people come in, Kristen, and we say, okay, how much have you saved for retirement? And they'll start adding up their IRAs and their 401ks, their 403bs, their 457s, all of those plans that are pre-tax plans. That means they haven't been taxed yet.
Right. All those tax deferred accounts. Yes.
All of those tax deferred accounts. And maybe you're sitting out there and you say, well, those sound like the accounts or some of them that I have. And you say, well, I think I have $1.2 million in those tax deferred accounts. Well, let me interject something. You don't have 1.2 million, even though your name's on that account. You and the federal government have 1.2 million in those tax deferred accounts, because to spend that money in retirement, to get that money out of retirement, and to do it legally and not end up like Al Capone in prison for 11 years, is you're going to have to pay income tax on every penny that comes out of those pre-tax dollars, those monies that have been put into the 401k, the IRA, and all of those things. You never paid tax on that. On almost all of it. There's some technicalities where you could have overpaid into a 401k or an IRA in a year, so it's gone into an after-tax account within there. Technicality. Not very many people fit that. Most of it, you're still going to have to pay tax on it. And some of you are sitting there saying, well, boy, I'm so glad I'm never going to have to touch that. Well, you may not have to touch that, but your partner, the federal government, when you turn 73 now, they're knocking on your door and saying, you might not need that money for retirement, but we need it to pay our $36+ trillion debt. So they're going to knock on your door for required minimum distributions. And you got to do that right, or you're going to get penalized. And I don't think you can probably be put into jail for that, because they've got money they can penalize you on, and they love to penalize you rather than to penitentiarize you, if you want to coin a word there, okay? But you're going to have to deal with taxes.
Yes.
And it's not something you can avoid. So it's really important that you see that.
For sure. And really, the retirement planning mistake is failing to consider the tax consequences of your investment choices and not having the right withdrawal strategy in place for yourself so that you can make sure you're generating income in the most tax efficient manner. And Tom, really, awareness is the first step of all of this. And this is why we have this this amazing tool that's completely free for you, our listeners, to utilize. We encourage you to visit this site. It's 𝗖𝗿𝗃𝗀𝗺𝗀𝗺𝗀𝗺𝗀𝗺.com. That's EASE mytaxbill.com. Tom, why don't you remind our listeners what they're going to experience when they visit this awesome resource?
Well, I'm going to bounce that one back to you in a minute because you're great at explaining how they go on and work that. So I'm going to let you do that in a minute. But here's what I want to tell you. You're not going to avoid taxes on your IRA and your 401k. There was a guy down here in Orange County where I was just located in Orange County a few years ago. And by the way, I'm over 30 years now. We haven't mentioned
I
that.
know.
I'm over 30 years of
Being in
of
this business,
being
yes.
in this business. But you see a lot of things, and you see a lot of gangsters, if you might want to say, who are trying to mislead people. And this guy, I had never met the guy, but I had two of his people that he had bumped into and two of his people that he had told his strategy to, and they came in to see me. This was about 8 or 10 years ago, and they said, this guy told us if we give him our money in our IRAs and 401ks, he'll move it and he'll move it and he'll move it over a period of years, and then about 4 or 5 years later he'll move it eventually into an account where I won't have to pay tax on it. Now, folks, that's called the penitentiary plan because that is not legal. You're going to have to pay tax. That's not a question as to whether you're going to legally have to pay tax. The question is, are you going to use the government's plan, which is, okay, as you take it out, it raises your income, you pay regular income tax, or when you get to the age of 73, you have to start taking money out in required minimum distributions. That's the government plan. And you have to take out a larger and a larger and a larger percentage every year. It's never based on a percentage, but it amounts to a larger percentage every year the rest of your life, even if you don't need the money. But remember, they do. So that's the government plan. Now, what we want to talk about in the last part of this segment, and Kristen, I want you to get ready to tell them how to use that software.
Yep.
But what we want to talk about is finding out, first of all, how much tax you potentially could have to pay on your 401k and your IRA. You're going to be blown away by that.
Yes.
And then we're going to show you another calculation through this software that Kristen's going to explain how you're going to be able to maybe reduce that by 50%, 60%, 40%, a huge amount of tax savings to you and your heirs on that 401k. It's a time bomb ready to go off from a tax perspective, and we're going to show you how to reduce it. Kristen, walk them through how they can go to that website, give them the website, and walk them through that for the end of the segment.
I would be glad to. So again, this free site is easemytaxbill.com. That's EASE mytaxbill.com. When you go to the site, there's a simple landing page, and you'll notice at the top, you can do it for just yourself as a single household, or you can click if you want to do it for you and your spouse, for example. There's a button that will allow you to select that as well. You're going to put in your name. You'll put in the email address that you want the complimentary report emailed to you. You need to put in your age because it's going to be calculating your potential tax bill over the rest of your life. So it needs to know where you're starting from. And then it's also going to ask you for how much money you have currently saved up in tax deferred accounts. So for you, that could be a traditional 401k, a traditional IRA, things of that nature. Then you'll notice there's two little sliding bars at the bottom of that page that you can play around with and adjust. You can adjust your assumed tax liability. You can also play around with the assumed growth rate on that tax deferred bucket of money. Then once you click submit, two things are going to happen. Boom, side by side, you're going to be able to see the difference between the government's tax plan for you on the left-hand side if you do nothing versus how much less you could pay in tax on the right-hand side if you enact some of these tax-saving strategies that Tom and the team of Mosley Wealth Management do with their clients every single day. But it doesn't end there. You're actually going to receive a complimentary 4-page report emailed directly to you. And that is going to show you the breakdown of your numbers. It'll show you that potential tax bill over the rest of your life, your RMD calculations. And to your point, Tom, once you see the difference of those numbers side by side between how much tax the government is going to have you pay if you just do nothing versus how much less you could pay, you can't unsee that. And folks are a lot more motivated to take action once they see it in writing, right?
Yeah, you need to do two things right now. If this has piqued your interest at all, you need to do one of two things. You need to go outside, find a sandbox from a family that's got children, and stick your head in the sand. Okay. Or you need to go stick your head in your computer and get on 𝗖𝗿𝗶𝗺𝗀𝗺𝗀𝗺𝗀𝗺, total up what you've got in those accounts, and find out what you don't know can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in many cases by following the government plan, which is legal, and also following your own plan, which is also legal. Not an Al Capone avoiding taxes. That's not what we're talking about, but paying them out on your terms, according to your tax situation, according to your income and your life. Do you want your own tax plan? It's all part of the retirement blueprint that we build for people when they come in and meet with us. And yours is available, but you've got to come in and meet with us.
Yes, the good news for you today is you don't have to settle for the government's tax plan for you. There are strategies and there are things that you can do to help you pay less to the IRS. Because again, at Mosley Wealth Management, we don't want you paying any more to the IRS in taxes than you are legally required to pay. So in addition to visiting 𝗖𝗿𝗶𝗺𝗀𝗺𝗀𝗺𝗀𝗺, we encourage you, that's just the first step. Pick up the phone, schedule your time to come in and sit down and receive your very own complimentary retirement blueprint, which will show you how exactly to do just that. 888-930-5609 is the number to call to schedule yours. We'll be back with more right after this.
Which will you spend more money on in retirement? Food or healthcare? Do you take your investments out of the stock market now that you're retired? How do you know if you've saved enough to stay retired? Will your Social Security check be reduced in the future? How do you produce income from your nest egg to fight costs like taxes and inflation? At Mosley Wealth Management, Tom Mosley and the team take the guessing out of retirement planning by devising a written plan that accounts for all of your concerns. The bigger question, are you going to be okay in retirement? Find out the answers to your retirement questions by calling Tom Mosley of Mosley Wealth Management, 888-930-5609. Income, investments, Social Security, Medicare, longevity, health care. We cover these solutions and all of those other questions on your mind to answer, are you going to be okay in retirement? Call Tom Mosley and Mosley Wealth Management for your own complimentary retirement review, 888-930-5609.
Welcome back. You're listening to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. He is the founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management based right here in Southern California, and I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. We are so glad you're joining us today. If you're just tuning in, we are talking about investment crimes that you might be committing. We want to bring awareness to these crimes so that you don't fall into these traps. And of course, we're using some famous examples to illustrate these different points. The next investment crime on our list is reckless financial behavior. And Tom, I'm sure that most folks hear that and they think, well, I'm not reckless. I'm a conservative investor. I have my money managed in maybe multiple mutual funds. I feel like I'm well diversified. Well, let's peel back the curtain on how a lot of folks are being reckless without even knowing it.
Yeah, I think if you were to I used to be a chaplain for the Anaheim Police Department way back about 35 years ago. And it's quite an interesting deal. You would ride along for about 3 hours with a policeman about every other week. And it's amazing what you saw. And occasionally we would pull people over for reckless driving. And typical response when you see it even on television and they get pulled over, officer, why'd you pull me over? I don't ever recall walking down the other side of the car with the policeman on the side of the car with the driver, I don't ever recall that driver saying, "I know you pulled me over for reckless driving." Because
Mm-hmm.
reckless driving is something you do and you don't realize you're doing the reckless driving, either because maybe you are inebriated, or maybe, you just don't drive very well. You're just reckless. You're taking risk and you're causing risk to come on the other people who are meeting you in the other lane or even in the lane that you're in. And I think about the movie The Wolf of Wall Street
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people saw that, and this guy got really deep into fraudulent stock and fraudulent stock market activity. This was back in the 90s, and
Mm-hmm.
this fictitious firm was, I think it was like Stratton Oakmont
Yep.
brokerage firm.
Yep.
And, they would put people into stuff and they'd lose money and they'd pull them out. And it was just total phony stuff going
They
on.
were
And
manipulating the stock prices, right? And
they,
artificially inflating them.
yeah, and they robbed people of a couple $100 million,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden the guy gets caught, and I think he served 22 months in a federal prison, and stuff. But
Mhm.
but just that idea of being reckless. Now let me bring that home to you. You say, I'm not the Wolf of Wall Street.
Right.
No, but you might be the wolf of your portfolio. You might be making reckless investments and not even know it. And some of you are raising your hand out there and you say, wait a minute, I've got a broker,
Mhm.
and my broker tells me that I'm moderate.
Mhm.
Well, I want to ask you what that means,
Yeah.
because moderate means different things. I mean, we all use those terms, and we also use these terms, but we go deeper, of conservative, balanced, moderate growth, aggressive growth. And you can just see the risk level going up as you walk through those terms. But you may have been told, hey, you're moderate. Well,
Mhm.
what does that mean in a risk score?
Right.
Now, let's talk about a risk score, because this is the way to keep yourself from being reckless.
Mhm.
Know your score. Know where you are. Like for one thing out there, it's totally unrelated, but you've got a credit score.
Mhm.
You need to know your credit score, because when you go to get a home loan or when you go get a car loan, they're going to charge you a different interest rate based on your credit score.
Right.
So you need to know that score. It's financial related, not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about three things. So, what are those three things you need to be aware of? Number one, you personally have a risk tolerance, and it can be scored from 0 to 100.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, what does that involve? It involves taking a little quiz that's not a pass fail quiz. It's just to determine where your risk tolerance is. And I want you to pound yourself on the chest and say, that's how I feel in here. This is my risk tolerance.
Mm.
I want you to think about, this is what allows me to sleep at night. This is
Yes.
the risk level I can take without being
Losing sleep.
afraid. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
assessment really of how you feel, and that's such an emotional thing for folks too.
Yeah, think about going to an amusement park with your kids
Mhm.
when your kids were at home, if they're not home anymore. And you've got that one kid that, man, that kid will ride anything. The rougher, the better. If he doesn't come home with bruises and a scrape from a roller coaster, it wasn't fun for him. And
Mhm.
then you've got that other kid that, they're afraid of the bumper cars because they have to ram into people a little bit. They're not going to get any scratches, but it's not nearly as shaky and upsetting as a roller coaster, because they just don't want to take that risk. They want to ride maybe the kiddie roller coaster, okay?
Right. Yep.
And usually what's funny, Kristen, is God puts a husband and a wife together where one of them wants to ride the kiddie roller coaster and the one wants to ride, excuse my expression, the roller coaster that goes like a bat out of Hades, if you
Right.
understand what I mean. Because that's the risk level. That's the risk score. Let's talk about real things here, okay? And that risk score may be 100 on that person who just really wants to take a great risk and doesn't care And it might be 10 or 0 or 5 on that one that wants to be real conservative. But you need to know your risk tolerance score. Now, how can you find that out? I can tell you how you can find out exactly what that is. We can help you with that. If you will call in to the number that Kristen will give you and say, I need to meet with somebody and find out my risk tolerance score. Then when you come in, you can come in, we can help you start building a retirement blueprint. But one of the first things we're going to do, even before you meet with the advisor, in the lobby of our offices, you're going to go through a risk tolerance evaluation, and we're going to be able to tell you a risk score of 0 to 100 to know your risk tolerance and to know what your risk ability to take that risk and still be able to sleep at night might be. Kristen, give them that number so
Yes.
that they can call.
Absolutely. That number to call is 888-930-5609. Again, 888-930-5609. That's your number to call to schedule your time to come in for no cost, no charge, no obligation. Sit down with the team of Mosley Wealth Management. You're going to be able to have your risk score assessed, and then they are going to build that complimentary retirement blueprint for you from scratch based on not just your risk score, but everything else that's going on in your life and what your financial goals are and what you are trying to accomplish. You know, Tom, as you were talking and we were sharing how a lot of folks are reckless and don't even know it, I think it has to go back to the fact that a lot of folks have never changed their investment strategy. And we talk about this a lot of times. Folks are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, still investing like they're in their 20s, and they have no idea. But it makes sense because maybe most of your wealth is saved up in a 401k. A lot of folks can relate to that, or a traditional IRA or a 403b. Think about where you were when you signed up for that plan. Have you ever gone back and looked at it? Have you ever gone back and made the necessary adjustments to fit your current age and stage of life? That's where a lot of the recklessness comes in.
Well, and some people are out there and, you don't want anybody to invade your space or invade your life or invade your financial world. And you're saying, can't you just send me that risk score? We can do that. We can do that. Everybody get that? We can do that. But you're only taking 1/3 of the equation and you're trying to solve the equation with just 1/3 of the facts. All right.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is exactly what you're talking about, Kristen. As we go through that retirement blueprint, we're going to take your portfolio. The reason we ask people to bring in their statements is so they can be evaluated, because your portfolio has the second score that you need to consider.
Mm-hmm.
And that portfolio has a risk score, again, from 0 to 100. So what is your portfolio risk score is the second score you need. And that's something that, again, can be evaluated by a neutral rating agency, somebody like Morningstar. We can run it through the Morningstar evaluation, and it'll come up with a score on your risk portfolio, on your portfolio as to the risk level that you're taking there. So what do you do there? You match those two numbers.
Mm-hmm.
There's 1/3 evaluation you need when it comes to risk. Not just your risk tolerance, not just your portfolio risk score, but you need to consider your risk capacity.
And that is so crucial, Tom. This is why there's often a lack of congruence and people are out of alignment with their investments, because it becomes so much about how much risk can you actually afford to take, your risk capacity. Maybe you have been, taking a lot of risk throughout your working career when you were contributing and putting money away and saving. And that was great because you had time on your side. Guess what? As you get older, time is no longer on your side. You may not have that same kind of time to make up for a loss. Therefore, your risk capacity has diminished.
What we're really saying on risk capacity is you just can't afford to lose anything.
Mm-hmm.
So some of you've saved enough that you can have a higher risk level and take a higher, maybe have a higher tolerance for risk and take more risk. But some of you need to have, and this is where there's no score to this, but a professional needs to look at it and to coach you and say, hey, you really need to be careful here because you're not like other people that have saved enough they might be able to afford to take more risk. You need to be careful. Where do you fit? Risk tolerance, risk capacity, portfolio risk level. You need to match those three up and get something you're comfortable with. That's what a retirement blueprint can do for you.
But again, you have to pick up the phone and call to schedule yours. So that number to call is 888-930-5609. Again, 888-930-5609. Stay with us. We'll be back with more right after this.
We believe retirement looks a lot different than it did for our parents and grandparents. With longer life expectancies, rising healthcare costs, and potential changing tax brackets, we think it's important to have a retirement plan that is tailored to your unique needs and goals. At Mosley Wealth Management, we understand the challenges that today's modern retirees face. That's why our experienced advisors work with you to develop a comprehensive retirement plan that takes into account all of the factors that can potentially impact your financial security in retirement. Whether you're looking to retire in the next few years or you're just starting to think about your retirement plan, Tom Mosley and the team at Mosley Wealth Management will provide you with a personalized evaluation of your current plan, including your investment strategy, tax planning, and risk management approach. We'll work with you to identify potential areas for improvement and create a plan that is designed to help you work towards achieving your retirement goals. Don't let the complexities of modern retirement planning keep you from achieving financial security and peace of mind in retirement. Call 888-930-5609 for your complimentary retirement blueprint.
Welcome back, Southern California. You're listening to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and we are continuing our conversation around investment crimes you may be committing. As we said at the top of today's show, we've been going on this little jail tour to look at some criminals. A lot of crime has to do with money and how their crimes can have a big effect on your retirement cash if you follow in their footsteps. So next up, this is an interesting one, Tom. Failing to plan for the future. And I know to illustrate this point, you want to talk about the famous bank robber, John Dillinger.
Oh man, he was a folk hero during the Depression, and he was such an aggressive bank robber and clever. And one time he escaped from jail with a fake gun, and he was almost like a character that anymore we follow on reality TV or something. I mean, this guy was out there. He was a darling. The media almost loved him, and they could never catch him. But the problem was he never saved any of his money. So he had to keep robbing banks. And if you keep putting that risk out there and never planning for the future, you have to do one of two things. You either have to just starve yourself eventually when you go out of business, or you have to stay in business and keep robbing banks. And eventually he got caught, and eventually, the end came. Hey, here's what I'm trying to say there. I'm also thinking about Bonnie and Clyde when I think about this, because they never saved up any money, and we know what happened to them. And I've seen the car, and I've seen the all of the things where they got riveted, and I love that movie. Okay, I did love that movie, Kristen. We talked about how we don't like crime stuff.
Right? Yeah.
I did like the movie Bonnie and Clyde.
There you go.
Don't sell that cow. I remember that, the joke and the punchline from there. And if you don't remember it, don't worry about it. Okay. Okay. Where does that fit you? Failing to plan for the future. They never saved any money for the future. They were always living for the now. Whatever. I mean, if they wanted a new car, they'd either steal one or buy one,
Right.
And if they wanted new clothes, they would get new clothes, and they would help family, and they would do all kind of things, but they never saved for the future. You may say, boy, you finally got down to me, because I've made a lot of, you may be in this situation. I've made a lot of money in my life. You say, Tom, how do you know people like this? Because I sit across from people in my conference room every single week. You've made a lot of money in your life, but you don't have much to show for it. And so you're afraid that you're going to have to just keep working and working and working. You know what? You might. You might have to. I'm going to be very honest with you. There's sometimes people come to see us. I work with a guy. I'm working a guy again with a guy who's got over $40 million. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I also have worked long term with a couple that they get about $700 and $750, I think it is, from Social Security. And from the time they came to me over a decade ago, they've had a little over $100,000, and they spend a little bit of that each year, and they're the happiest people on the earth. So somewhere between $100,000 and $40 million. Do you fit in that category? Hello. If you're in somewhere in between those parentheses, then we've worked with you. And I sit down with a lot of people who don't have enough money to legitimately retire. It's one thing the retirement blueprint will do for you, because you're sitting out there and you're thinking about retiring, you're wanting to retire, your company just got bought out by some other company. You've
Mhm.
got a brand new boss. And one lady came in recently and she said, I don't like the people I work with, I don't like my boss, and I don't like my company anymore. And I've been there for 35 years, but with all of the changes that have taken place since COVID, I just don't want to be there anymore. And her question to me was, can I afford to retire? And remember this lady very specifically, because she'd failed to plan.
Mm.
And she had a little bit of money saved, but not enough money saved so that she could legitimately retire. She was going to have to work. She was going to have to do something. That's the kind of question we can help you run through an analysis that we call building a retirement blueprint for you. And we will tell you as honestly, as peaceably, as kindly as we can, these are some steps you need to take to be able to retire. Now, hopefully, if you're listening to this, and I'm trying to appeal to you, yes, because we want to help you, and you're 50 or 55 and you say, man, I'm behind the eight ball, I just haven't saved what I need to save, you need to come in and meet with us. But Tom, I don't have much money. Doesn't matter. Come in and meet with us so we can help you get into a position where you can have enough money to retire, and we can give you a target date, and we can give you a plan and a strategy to get to that point. If you've been like Dillinger and you've spent every penny you've saved, not robbed, but saved. You haven't
Mhm.
saved any money.
Right.
You've made money, but you've spent it. Maybe you've spent it on good things. You spent it on your kids, travel ball, dance, all of those things. But now it's time to start building a plan for the future to save some of that cash that's running through your fingers. You need to come in and see us. You need to sit down with us. Tom, I don't have any money. Come in and see us. We can tell you how to get money.
Yes, absolutely. Again, that number to call to schedule your time to come in and get your very own complimentary retirement blueprint is 888-930-5609. The number one cause of financial failure is procrastination. Don't let that be you. Like Tom said, it doesn't matter how much you have, it's what you do with it that matters. And you have the ability, Tom, and the team of Mosley Wealth Management, to look at everybody's individual puzzle and put it together specifically to them. So again, this is not something you can call and say, hey, can you send me one of those retirement blueprint thingies off the shelf? Because that's not how it works. It's you coming in, getting your questions answered, them assessing your situation, and then building it from scratch on a blank sheet of paper, customized and personalized to you. Well, Tom, I think we have time for one more crime today. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All
I
right.
like this one. I like this one better than any.
Okay. So this
All right.
one is relying on one-time windfalls.
I think of the
Intriguing.
guy. I know. I think of the guy D.B. Cooper. Now, D.B. Cooper, I'm sure was an alias. They don't know who the guy really was, but he hijacked a Boeing aircraft, and he was up in the Seattle area. And he hijacked a plane. He demanded $200,000 in ransom money, and this was way back in the 70s. And they actually gave him the money. Plane was sitting there on the tarmac. They gave him the money. He ordered the pilots to take off. He had a parachute,
Oh,
and he
gosh.
jumped out of the plane with suitcases full of cash. And to this day, they've never found him.
Wow.
They've never found the guy. They did find some people who were hiking in the area where the plane, they don't know when he jumped out or any of those kind of things, but in some of those areas, they found cash floating around in the woods in some of those areas. But it's one of the richest unsolved mysteries in the history of American aviation. Okay.
Side note, I think of how much you and I both fly, Tom. I'm just
I
really
know.
glad I wasn't on that plane.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Okay. Because this guy jumped out with all that money. So here's the deal. Some of you are planning on a parachute from your parents, or maybe more than that, you've gotten a parachute from your parents that's full of money. Okay.
Mhm.
You've got a one-time windfall. And a lot of people, it's notorious. There have been books written about people who win lotteries.
Yep.
And they haven't worked for the money. It was just a windfall that came to them. I remember Bob Houseworth. When I worked for the Dallas Mavericks back in the late 80s, 1980s, and we interviewed him at halftime of a Dallas Maverick game. I was the assistant director of the Mavericks telecast for 3 years for the home telecast, and we interviewed Bob Houseworth. He had been the first Publishers Clearing House giveaway winner. And he had diamond rings on every one of his fingers and one of his thumbs. Okay. And he was wearing the flashiest suit, and he's notorious because he ran out of money in about a year and a half.
Wow. Yeah.
Because he won all of those millions, but he didn't know how to handle it.
Yep. And that's so common.
It is. It's more common than any. I mean, it's like 95% of the people that get a windfall lose it within X amount of years. Don't be in that situation. If you've never had much money and you get a windfall from mom and dad, your parents pass away and the house gets sold and you get $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. And that's about all you have for retirement. I'm talking real specifically to some people. Be so careful. Let that be a pot of money you don't lose. Get some financial advice and planning. If you've never had money or never had that money, don't squander it. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until it's gone. First of all, every relative you've got is going to know you've gotten that money, and they're going to come out of the woodwork and they're needy. They're all needy. Be careful for that. You're going to have all those things that you want, and you can have some of the things that you want now, but you can't have everything that you want. You need some financial planning with that nest egg, with that windfall that you've inherited, so that you don't lose that money. We can start building you a retirement blueprint, and what a great start to build not only your lifetime, but a legacy of financial solidity so that you don't stay in that living from paycheck to paycheck situation. But you got to be wise enough to say, I don't know how to handle this. I need some help from somebody I can trust to handle this the right way. And be careful for your brother Bubba the plumber and all of those relatives that want to help you. Be careful. Get some financial advice. Let us help you by building a blueprint.
Yes, so much goes into building a comprehensive, holistic retirement blueprint for you. But all you need to do is pick up the phone and call. Again, this is for no cost, no charge, no obligation. It's simply an invitation to have a conversation to see how the team of Mosley Wealth Management can help and serve you. 888-930-5609 is the number to call to schedule yours. Again, that's 888-930-5609. Hey, thanks so much for joining us this weekend. We hope you've enjoyed this lively conversation around investment crimes that you might be committing and how to avoid making them. Be safe, be happy, be blessed, and we look forward to being back with you next time here on Right on the Money with Tom Mosley.
Investment advisory services offered by duly registered individuals through Mosley Wealth Management Incorporated. Mosley Wealth Management and Mosley Insurance and Financial Services are affiliated companies by common ownership license number OB61811. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refers to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength, claims paying ability of the issuing carrier. This content is intended for for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the needs of an individual situation. All hypothetical examples are provided for illustrative purposes only. They do not represent real-life scenarios. Mosley Insurance and Financial Services, nor its agents or representatives, may give tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with a qualified professional for guidance before making any investment decisions. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Some of the information provided may be from one or more third parties which we believe to be reliable sources, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Mosley Insurance and Financial Services.